And now to address the...
Hello, I lost the sound, TLC.
Is everybody there?
I'm here. I just got cut off. You cut me off for a second. We're ready to go. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Nathaniel.
Okay, I was talking about the radio station.
I know you were. Is John and Milton still there?
You got the line.
Are we ready to go?
I can hear you. I can hear Benita. I've heard John. I heard your people.
Is this Brandon?
Just,
Are we ready to go, Brandon?
Yes, sir. You guys are live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Legal Issue of the Day with Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank all our listeners for being supporting our show. You could also remember that we're broadcasting live on YouTube on Legal Issues of the Day with Nathaniel Lee. We'll also be on Facebook, and so you'll be able to follow us both ways. We also are a live call-in talk show. Our phone number is 317-239-1310. That's 317-239-1310. Today, we have our superstar panel again, starting with Milton Grimes, the great trial lawyer out of LA, who famously represented successfully Rodney King, that started the evolution of videotaping police abuse in America. Then we had John Sweeney, who is one of the top litigators in the country. John exposed widespread corruption in the sheriff department. He had a video of a sheriff admitting to doing racial that was viewed by over 1 million viewers, the most incredible thing. And then we also have our superstar researcher, Vanita Banks, past president of the National Bar, masters in tax, cybersecurity expert. Vanita Banks just a gifted lawyer and a great communicator. So good morning, team. How you guys doing today?
Good morning. Good morning. Nate.
good morning. Doing well.
Well, a couple of things that's important. We saw an insurrection, and we've now seen 1,000 videos of things that occurred during the insurrection. But there's some things that we need to put out there from a factual standpoint very briefly. The 2020 presidential election was the 59th presidential election in the United States of America. It was the 59th. In the election, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris received 81,281,891 votes. That's 81,281,891, or 51.3% of the vote. Donald J. Trump received 74,223,250, or 46.9% of the vote. In the history of our country, it was the largest voter turnout in the history of our democracy. So the next is that Joe Biden received 360 electoral votes. He won by a slide. In all the states that were mattered, he won by a greater margin in the critical state of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin than Donald Trump. Yet we saw widespread attacks on the system by saying that the election was rigged, widespread voter fraud, and shockingly, when you watch the video feed, it is evidence that a large percentage of Americans, Republican citizens, believe that the election was corrupt. And that's where we start today. Now we start with, let's start with the ladies, the top flight, Vanita Banks. Attorney Banks, you saw the same thing. What are your thoughts?
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Attorney Lee. We watched, first, we saw, and as you just summarized, a model for a free and fair election in this nation. In fact, as the president's own cybersecurity agency chair, Chris Krebs, stated that this was the most secure and fair election in the history of America. And so when the when Congress convened to last week to complete what should have been a routine and largely ceremonial, if you will, process of certifying the vote, we watched in horror a riotous mob attack the Capitol and perpetuate treasonous, seditious, and insurrectious acts. And frankly, as I was transfixed on the television, I felt so many emotions, from horror to anger to sadness at the frontal attack on our democracy. To see the Confederate flag traipse through the Capitol building, and to watch in horror a noose hanging outside of the Capitol, and to see this mob receiving what appeared to be red carpet treatment, as the barriers were removed and they were escorted in and escorted out. It is clear that, as Speaker Pelosi stated, a 9/11 type commission should be established, and we need to investigate exactly what occurred, all the facts leading up to this horrible insurrection. And we need to start by identifying everybody involved on a state, federal, and local level, whether that's a member of Congress, law enforcement. There obviously was a failure of security, a failure of intelligence. It's my understanding that there were some intelligence reports that were made to the Capitol Police that were not acted on. Obviously, this should have been anticipated. There was all types of social media chatter leading up to this insurrection. And as you know, for many years, intelligence leaders have warned that the biggest threat to our national security is the domestic terrorist threat. I'll stop there.
Attorney Sweeney, your thoughts on the issue?
Yeah, Attorney Banks really did a great summary of what happened. But let's look at why it happened, why this insurrection, why this rise in white supremacy. These insurrectionists, these white supremacists, really feel an undertow of their forefathers, and they now really believe that this country is for white people. It was born of white people when African Americans were enslaved, that it was passed on, and they really feel a duty, a great sense of duty to keep it white. And Trump, who was the ultimate huckster and charlatan and fraud, saw that, and he tapped into that, and he dog whistled to him, and he has been doing so for 4 years. And so that's what's beneath everything, is basically racism, trying to keep things like their forefathers had it. And that's the basis of this whole thing. And of course, they want white supremacy. We want equality. Native Americans, Latinos, by and large, want equality, and of course, African Americans want equality. We don't want one race over the other. We just want to be equal. These white supremacists want white supremacy. And I have a message to those people. You don't own America. You are third in line. If you look at basic equity and legal rights, Native Americans own this land, fee simple, absolute, for thousands and thousands of years. It was stolen from them. They were marched off the land by violent groups and colonialists, and marched through the Trail of Tears to other parts of the country and relocated on reservations. So Native Americans are first in line. Second in line for ownership of this country are African Americans. Do you know that about 70% of the gross domestic product of America during slavery was generated by slaves? And in the 17 and 1800s, America was not an international power. What made us an international power was our international trade. And the products that we traded mostly were cotton products that were generated by slaves, shirts and curtains and tablecloths and things like that. And we became an economic power. So we're second in line. Third in line are Caucasians, for the reasons I stated. So that's the underlying cause of the problem in America today with white supremacy. They have a tremendous feeling that they owe their land, their ancestors, and that they truly believe this is their country.
Attorney Grimes, who's one of the top criminal lawyers in America, one quick question for you that's a little bit unusual. The protesters said that we were invited into this place by the President of the United States. So the protesters actually believe that the text, the Twitters that they received from the President of the United States is invited them to break into the Capitol building. Would that be a workable offense?
I think that is a worthwhile defense, to answer your question directly, but that's supported by history. Throughout history, whites have undertaken to express what they consider to be their rights, to correct the wrong, from lynching individuals, from individual people, from the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, from the marches in Mississippi and Alabama and in the South, on the brutality that was perpetrated upon Black people. I'm sure you remember the school marches and the hatred that we saw from whites. So they feel, I believe, legitimately entitled. It was not a surprise at what they did last week. So I think it probably will go a long ways as a defense for their actions. I was reading this morning in the paper about the number of ex-police officers, ex-military people, and present police officers and military people that were in that group of people. Those, I don't want to say protesters, because they were criminals. One of the first things I heard out of the pundits and the newscasters' mouths before the streets had cleared was, if this was Black Lives Matter group, there'd be bodies lying in the street. So what that incident did for me was expose the core of the racism in this country, clearly to everybody. There's not a doubter amongst us or anywhere else who would say, well, Black folks would have been treated the same way. They would have gotten away with doing the same thing. I think all of us sitting here would agree we would expect a lot of bodies had it been Black Lives Matter that went to the Capitol last Wednesday. So you asked me the question about whether or not that would be a defense. I think it's arguably an explanation, it's a mitigation that your leader Your fierce leader has directed you to come on down and fight for what's right, undo this wrong that has been perpetrated. This is the, what do you call him, John? This is the chief, whatever they call him.
Hustler, you call him Hustler, I think.
No, I'm saying officially, he is the head. He's the
Commander in
chief.
Chief.
He's the chief. They're following an administrative order. They're following the directives of the chief. He invited them to come on down and take and undo this wrong. So commander. Yeah, he's the commander in chief. He invited them to come on down and do this. Just as Tom Metzer did out here in California when he was developing this skinhead group, and they were all around the country. And this is before the social media we have. Young people were acting out on his hatred towards Native Americans and Black people. And they killed a young man up in Oregon. They killed an Ethiopian young man. I know the case well because my classmate, Ansel Haggerty, was the federal judge over the trial. And they found that Metzer words infuriated and activated these young skinheads around the country to action. They perpetrated the violence that he preached, and they killed this young Ethiopian father. The jury found him guilty of what they did, and they bankrupt that skinhead organization. He did live here in Fallbrook, California. He died not too long ago. So I think the commander-in-chief, just as Metzer did back in the year, is responsible for what they did. But yeah, they do have a defense that he commanded them or requested them or invited them to come down to the Capitol.
Okay, now we have a bunch of callers. Let's take one of the callers real quickly. Caller, you have a question, a comment? We had some excellent presentations. So what's your question for today?
Yes, you do. Thank you, Brother Nate. How you doing? Brother Motepin. Happy New Year to our guest. Thank you. Great truth there. You know, having some lawyers in the family, I just appreciate the Socratic and Platonic and the honesty that you all give. It seems like we have a number of people in the community. And I know, Attorney Grimes, we talked about this before about some of our pastors, but some of them are disappointing me, and I'll get right to it. First thing is, last Saturday, and you all are attorneys, and this gentleman is not, and I got three, my mother and two siblings are attorneys, so we talked about this. Pastor Jackson talked about Pence's role when they did the Electoral College. He stated on this radio that Pence could have stopped it, but he did the right thing, and I told him no. Matter of fact, I'm looking at the Harvard Law today right now. Harvard Law Review, Lawrence Tribe, one of the constitutional law professors, said Pence serving basically was nothing he could do. He's a ceremonial role. He had no power to overturn the results. So that, I think, was a falsehood that was perpetrated throughout there that I'd like you to address. Number two, you just talked about the police involvement. I asked both of them, Reverend Charles Harrison and Reverend James Jackson, what their opinion of this police, because, see, they're telling Black people here that in order for us to get this better treatment between the police, that we must build these relationships with law enforcement. And there's no relationship to build when law enforcement has always been the way they've been towards Black people. So I asked them what was their opinion now, because I'm a military vet, and it disturbs me that a bunch of veterans, but we know that there's white supremacists in the military that was there, and I got no response from either one of them. So that was disturbing. And then number three, that you can address this censorship argument that Black conservatives are arguing on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. Dr. Boyce Watkins, Judge Joe Brown, Candace Owens about Twitter and Facebook, so-called censoring Trump, and they seem to not understand that censorship applies to the government. Private business pretty much can do what they want to do, and I posit that by saying, if you think you can say anything you want to say, then go to work and get a crowd of people and say the most outlandish things you can about folks and see what happens. Or if you own a business, tell your customers they stink or you hate them and then see what happens. Free speech is not free. So I'd like you guys to address that, and thank you for taking my call.
Okay, now we're going to answer your question, but our producer said we're going to take a commercial break for 3 minutes, and we'll get back in our distinguished panels will address those three issues. Take it away, producer. Hello, producer? They are? I can't hear.
John is already prepared for the war. He's dressed in his fatigue-looking shirt, camouflage shirt. Hi, John Sweeney, wake up.
What's that?
Not that I was admiring your dress.
Who's that, me?
You got on your camouflage shirt. Look like you're getting ready.
Actually, this is it's a Patagonia travel shirt, and what you can't see, Vanita and Nathaniel, I know it's about 20 degrees where you guys are. It was 88 yesterday and 84 today. So
It was too warm this morning.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was too warm, Benita. I feel sorry for you in Chicago, honey. Yeah. Quite
So
warm.
this is like a jungle shirt.
I know. You're getting ready.
What's that?
You're getting ready. It looked like the camouflage shirt.
You wouldn't
Hey.
believe
But this
it.
being recorded on YouTube.
I didn't.
Oh, wait a second, stop.
Stop anything illegal.
But I apologize. We're still being broadcast on YouTube. Can we cut that out? You're still live. Okay, we're still live on YouTube. I apologize. We got to fix this so that when we go to break, we could cut the YouTube off.
No problem. My fault.
Hello, Mr. Lee.
Yes. Are you ready to go back?
Hi. We have 50 seconds left, and then I'm gonna play your music, and then I'm gonna, cue you back in. Okay?
Okay, 15 seconds. We'll be ready to roll.
What was
Yeah.
the,
So just
Who want to answer the first question? Pinch roll.
you're going in and out, sir.
Can you hear me
So you
okay?
got 30 seconds. Okay? I can hear you now. Sometimes it's in and out, but right now you got 25 seconds. Okay? So I'll just listen for the music. I'll let you know when you're on. Okay?
Okay. So who want to deal with Pence? We got Pence, police relations, and censorship. Who?
Okay. Yes. You got 10 seconds. Okay?
Okay.
Amherst and 10th Street. Call today, 317-405-8097, 405-8097 for reservations or to-go orders.
Well, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for caller. And as soon as they turn off the music, we'll answer that question. Okay, let's start off with the call. Had 3 questions, and the other callers hold the line. But there were 3 things that Imhotep raised. And first, he talked about the role of the Vice President Pence. Which one of our all-star panels like to address issue number 1? The role of the Vice President Pence in the election process.
I'll address that one. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Benita.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Vice President Pence had no authority above and beyond what those of us that witnessed the process observed. And many of us, I'm sure, across the country, that was the first time that you actually witnessed the Congress certify the Electoral College vote. That is a ceremonial, if you will, process, and the Vice President is required to accept the results of the Electoral College and had no authority to go beyond that. In fact, I believe the Constitution requires this process occur on the day that it occurred, January 6th.
The second question to other panel, police community relationships. Caller want to know, well, he had a series of questions about police relationships, and I know you both have comments about police relationships, so You want to know what can we do to resolve it? What can be done to fix it? And we know that it's a problem in our community. So gentlemen, go ahead.
Let me start, Milton.
Go ahead.
I truly believe that police officers should have some knowledge of the community. I think that police officers from ethnic areas should be that same ethnicity. I think the majority of the police officers, let's take Compton, that is run by the sheriff's department, or patrolled by the sheriff's department. I think there should be a majority of African-American and Latino officers. Instead, there's about 80% Latino officers, about 15% white officers, and less than 5% African-American officers. And the city is about, it used to be 80% African-American, now it's about 49, 50%. And that's the crux of the problem. Because minorities understand and are used to dealing with minorities, and they aren't frightened. You get a white person from the suburbs who was raised in the suburbs, you put him in a minority community, he is going to be frightened. He's going to shoot first and ask questions later. And understand also that police officers feel they have some type of power because they have the color of authority to arrest, they have a badge and a gun, and they abuse it. And it's not necessarily a racial thing. They'll do what they can get away with. You see the same police officers, sheriff's department patrolling Compton and East LA and South Los Angeles and other places, and they are heavy-handed. They have these gangs, and they are committing a lot of abuses on the community. However, you go to another community where Milton Grimes lives, over Ladera Heights and View Park, which is also patrolled by the sheriff's department, but you don't get all of that. You don't get all of the abuse, and those are very affluent African-American communities. These sheriff officers know they can't get away with it over there. So to answer the questions, the caller's question, I think it starts with community policing. That is, people from the community. I think that we need to weed out all those people who do not necessarily need to be police officers, who psychological testing instead of just physical testing. And classes on policing in the academy, there should be really a psychological test to see if you even have the makeup to become a police officer based on your background.
Attorney Grimes, though, there's one other issue, though, that troubled me. These officers were beaten, they were tased, one was killed, only one civilian was shot, and many of them had 25 of them of the Metro Police Department had loaded weapons, yet none fired on the people that were trying to kill them.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Double standard, definitely. Also, Trump has been railing on for 4 years how he loves the police, and all these people, the MAGA people, we must respect the police. Defunding the police is horrible, and his own people are the ones who go and kill police officers and assault police officers. There's no question.
I think the race of the protesters had a significant amount to do with how they were treated, Nathaniel. Yeah, they did comprise of police officers against police officers, but I do believe that subconscious, conscious racism, systemic racism that has exists kind of dictated how that matter was going to be handled. And I think it's a trickle-down effect. The mentality of the chief of police trickle down to the subordinates. I recently read of a judge in Fairfax County, Virginia, the circuit court there. Fairfax County is where I lived for about 7 years, from 11 to 18. So I'm sort of proud of this particular judge. Bernhardt is his name. He wrote an 11-page opinion letter to his fellow judges a couple of weeks ago saying he would not try another case in his courtroom for an African-American defendant with all of these white men pictures around the courtroom. He refused to conduct a trial in his courtroom because of the pictures that exist in the courtroom, which he said evidence superiority of the white race and racism. And he didn't think that a jury could be fair sitting in that environment, could be fair to an African-American or a minority. He wrote a hell of an indictment of our justice system, which the police department is just a part of, as to the racism that permeates the minds of people, overtly, covertly, however. So we need to do some cleansing, folks, throughout all of our systems and get to the core of this racism before we can move forward. And it goes to the police department, it goes inside the courtroom, just as this judge has brought out. So I'll be glad, I sent you, I believe, a copy of an article out of Kentucky where they had trained state police officers with quotes from Hitler and General Robert E. Lee, and taught state police officers in Kentucky, and it wasn't so long ago that they discovered this, I think 2013, so some of those officers I'm sure are still on the force, to have a militaristic attitude, to be like a soldier in combat, that when they kill, don't suffer any emotions from that. Don't think about it, just keep going, because you just killed an object or you eliminated an object, you didn't kill a human being. So when you have that type of training of our police officers, and when you have people in the courtroom being influenced by subtle things like this judge brought out, we end up being a victim.
One of the problems that we experienced, and like all Americans, is that the fact that we saw police officers with guns who, in my mind, they did not exercise their duty. Most of the time, we're the victim of police action shooting. There's a 6-to-1 probability if you're African American male, you'd be shot by a police officer versus a white person. But the problem I had, though, is that the officers who they characterized some as being heroes, I just felt when I was watching part of the videotape that they weren't properly defending the Capitol. In other words, they have guns, and these people stated purpose was go and kill people, even the vice president. They were looking for Nancy Pelosi. We learned that high-ranking black officials in congressional, they had targeted them. They went to Jim Clyburn's office for the stated purpose to kill them. But yet, I was troubled by the fact that the officers, some people said they used remarkable constraint or restraint, but I saw it differently. I did not understand why the officers did not use the legal powers to end the attempted murder. So we had
power had it been Black Lives Matter, Nathaniel, do you believe?
Well, I don't think that Black Lives Matters, I don't know a lot about the individual, but I don't think that they would have had the gall to try to break into the Capitol in the first place.
That's not the question.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, we saw, or everybody saw, the strong force they used on the Black Lives Matter. They arrested over 300 Black Lives Matter protesters who didn't break in any government building. And so here, the very essence of democracy, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, it's the Congress. They invaded the core of our Constitution. Yet, one person was shot who was trying to break in and kill people apparently inside of one of the barricaded rooms. And so the protest was upset. But I was just stunned by the fact that they were brazenly saying, let's kill Pence. He's a Republican. And then they want to kill the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who was a Democrat. But it just troubled me that they then posted this on the internet. So I was stunned by the boldness of their actions. I was stunned by the fact that they thought it was okay to videotape it and to walk out of the building with government property. It was just stunning to me. But from that, we learned something that's very true in America. There are two Americans that we see. We saw front and center how law enforcement officials treated people who were Trump supporters, the MAGA people. Those are MAGA. And what was insulting about the process is that we saw some of the Republican representatives try to turn the page in history and say that those MAGA supporting the terrorists were Antifa or some other Black Lives Matter. I mean, it was insulting. So we see now front and center an attempt to rewrite the American history right in front of our eyes.
Well,
We all saw that. Go ahead, sir.
Nathaniel, it doesn't that evidence that these people felt a protection. They felt a
Entitlement.
they felt they were entitled to do this and they could get away with doing it. They've never been punished for attacks of the government or attacks of people. So why be punished this time? It's
Let me tell you-
embedded in them.
I've always stated that America needed, and so many of us, I'm sure, have stated that America needed to have, an honest conversation about race. Well, guess what? We're right in the middle of it, and
Yes.
It is ugly, and it is framed and based on what John so eloquently stated earlier. I mean, this goes back to 1619, and regardless of the socioeconomic status, there are some people that feel that they are better than Black and brown people based on the color of their skin.
Yeah, but here's where we are now, moving forward. This is the United States of America. Up until the last 4 years, we were the model democracy for the whole world. We saw something that was so stunning to me. First, after they announced the election of Joe Biden winning, we saw millions of people take to the street. I've never seen that before. Then we saw an attempt to subvert democracy. We saw an attempt to actually overthrow the government of the United States right in front of our eyes. That was not an attempt to simply to kill people. They were attempting to overthrow the United States government. I mean, if you look at the subsequent videos, they thought that once they captured the Capitol, they would now control the government and keep Trump in power. It's the most insane thing I'd ever seen.
Let me say this, that none of us on this panel were alive to witness the rise of Adolf Hitler. But you look back in history and you say, how could this have happened? How could 6 million people end up dead? How can one man control all of Germany and compel his acolytes to act like they did? How could that possibly happen? And we saw in 4 short years how something like this could happen. This has been 4 years, a 4-year trashing of democracy, the 4-year blurring of the line of the separation of powers. There was no line between the executive, the legislative and judicial branch at the end of Trump's administration. He put his people in, and there was no separation, and there was no checks and balances. Had he gotten in for another 4 years, this country would have been a dictatorship. And the voters saw that. And Black people, once again, saved this country. We saved this country with our vote. That can't be overemphasized enough. Black people are responsible for Biden's victory. And now we can see that we can never let this happen again. These people including Pence. I don't care what he's saying now. All these people who are jumping off the ship, the wrecks, abandoning the ship, they need to be prosecuted also. There needs to be prosecution because we have to have a deterrent from this ever happening again. This was very, very close to Nazi Germany. Very close.
Okay, now we'll hear from one of the Trump supporters. Okay, producers, put the next call on the line, please. Larry, go ahead, Larry.
You cannot call me a Trump supporter, but I tell you what, we can look at y'all smart people. You can see that this is all staged, and it's to do one thing, to get our minds off of you. And your attorney friend just said that we elected Joe Biden, so now it's payday. When are we going to get our reparations? We set up smoke screens and everything else and roadblocks to keep us from our reparations. If we help them to win the election, our cry should be for reparations and not because of some scam that they're trying to put up right now in our faces to make us forget about their promises to us of reparations. I mean, I've heard a lot of people out there that are attorneys and so forth, and you know what they always say, Nate? They say that, hey, we can't do it because you guys don't know what you want. So reparations is part of the deal, and we need to start talking about that right away before they lose the Congress and the Senate.
One quick question. How do you plan on, Larry, implement reparations? Just tell me in 1 minute or less, how could you implement that?
Now,
and how would you go about doing it?
Your rhetoric leading up to the campaign, leading up to the campaign and election, you talked about reparations, and a couple of your other friends did also, and made that look like that they had already been worked out and settled what that process would be. Nobody has come to me and asked me what I wanted to have as far as a formula, but I'm sure we could look at past history, look how they reparation to the Japanese, look how the Jews have been repaired for their distress and whatever they lost during those trying times. So they could be modeled after that, Nate. And I think that we have smart people, but Al Sharpton should get a march together right now so we can march on Washington. But wait a minute, we can't do that. There's 30,000 National Guards there guarding the city. So I think that we've been duped again. And like your one lady said, we did win the election for them. And now we've been thrown to the side, and Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of them are telling them to kiss their behind. So that's what's happening, maybe. Y'all can see that. I'm saying that you can.
Okay.
There's a lot to unpack from the caller's remarks. But first, I think we need truth. We have to start with truth, and then we need accountability. Those that were involved in the planned, organized, domestic terrorist attack on our democracy should be prosecuted and convicted. And there are a number of causes of action. I know we talked about some of the defenses, but everything from sedition, there are those that are saying that we need a domestic terrorism legislation, but there are a number of causes of action, from recklessly endangering members of Congress or attempting to murder members of Congress, to murder for some of those that were killed, that their deaths resulted from the actions, anywhere from trespass to property, theft, assault, battery, murder, sedition. So there are a number of, as you know, over 100 participants have been arrested and many more to follow. But first it starts with truth. And then we have to move to accountability. And I think from that point, we can try to look toward reconciliation. And I think a great model is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was established in South Africa. I wholeheartedly agree with our caller regarding reparations. There have been reparations bills introduced in Congress beginning back in the 1980s. Every year, Representative John Conyers introduced reparations legislation, and most recently, last week, I believe, a new bill was introduced to simply establish a commission to research and come back with specific recommendations. And certainly that is legislation that I would advocate that President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris should wholeheartedly endorse and support.
Attorney Sweeney?
Yes, with respect to the charges that Attorney Banks was talking about, I think that if this were a Black Lives Matter issue, that black folk had stormed the Capitol, every last one of them who could be identified would be charged with murder. And as Milton knows, Milton's an old criminal lawyer, and he knows that I'm an old criminal lawyer, that in the commission of a felony, even an accidental killing, you can be charged with murder. I'll give you an example. If you go to rob a liquor store and the proprietor of the liquor store pulls out from the back of the counter a gun and shoots and hits someone across the street who's just jogging, nothing to do with it, the perpetrator of the murder can be charged with murder. Or if a police officer is called to the scene and a getaway driver is waiting at the curb to take that the robber of the liquor store away to safety, and a police officer shoots the getaway driver, the perpetrator of the robbery can be charged with the murder of his own co-conspirator. So sedition, which I understand carries 20 years, and some of the other disorderly conduct charges are the lesser of the charges that I feel should be brought upon these seditionists. I have one final thing. I have been advocating show for all this time that we should seek reparations. That's the only thing that's going to get us on an equal footing with majority in this country, is economic equality. And reparations can come in many forms: college scholarships, business grants, individual help to citizens with one-time grants, land which we were promised, 40 acres and a mule, which we never got. So reparations come in many, many areas. Look what we've done. Look what we've done on our own, basically, since Reconstruction. The white folks depicted us in Birth of a Nation and other early films as cowering, scared, running after white women. Now we have our own studios. We have our own radio and TV stations so that we can control our own, the way we are portrayed. So reparations is a must. I think this is the perfect time. We have the Congress and the both branches of government, both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the presidency and the vice presidency. And we are owed a tremendous debt of gratitude for what we did in saving this democracy. I think now is the perfect time.
Well, let's take one caller real quickly if we have somebody on, and then we'll go back. Caller, thanks for holding for a long time. Yes, sir.
Nate and gentle lawyers, lady and the gentleman. Happy New Year to everybody. Wishing everybody all the best.
Thank you,
now,
sir.
This is my comment. As much as we can talk about everything, which is what we do, we talk. The issue is, and I'm hoping that Black Lives Matter never finds themselves in a situation where they are outgunned and outmanned. However, the Capitol Police were outgunned and they were outgunned and outmanned. I would hate to have seen this turn into a gun battle. Those guys carrying the automatic weapons, carrying the AK and the ARs. It would have been terrible for the U.S. for this to turn into a gun battle. Wish that it happened. Wish that it didn't have to happen. We know Trump was wrong. We know that those people were wrong. But I'm real glad we're not discussing a massacre in our capital.
But Ron, but here's the problem though. The problem is their job was to protect. And we had terrorists that said they were going to kill the vice president of the United States. They were going to kill the speaker of the House. So just by pure luck of a brave officer, black officer, who steered them away from the vice president, we would have multiple homicides. So the question though, Ron, is that the best solution to allow the terrorists to go and murder high-ranking government officials in that manner? Is it okay to give them a pass? Okay, did we lose Ron? Okay.
Let me just say, Nathaniel, nobody advocates or nobody wants this to turn into a civil war or a gun battle, but it was the white supremacists who showed up to the Capitol heavily armed with bombs, Molotov cocktails. So we can't just let them run roughshod, like you said, Nathaniel. It was they who were the aggressors, and we can't let them just run roughshod over democracy.
Well, I agree with Ron in the sense that he said that we did not want to have mass murders. I agree. On the other hand, I have a point of departure is that I was concerned that they allowed them to invade the Capitol to kill people. And I'm disturbed by that.
Well,
So-
isn't there something about they were held back support for those guards for an hour and a half or two? They could have planned better and prevented this whole thing, but somehow or another the word didn't get up the chain of command intentionally.
Well, I would advocate on the record today that we need to have a detailed investigation of what occurred in the chain of command. We did notice that the director of FBI did not come out until this week, about 8 days later. So all the people that were in charge of this process did not give us a clear understanding of why we had such a monumental collapse in our nation capital. So I think the first thing we have to do is, like we do as trial lawyers, we have to follow the trail of evidence. We have to follow the money, find out where all the money came from to finance this massive terrorist operation. And then I think that we have to hold everybody accountable. I came up with an idea. I woke up this morning, I was thinking that one of the things that they could do, because I mean, Attorney Banks pointed out they've arrested 100. I saw maybe 300, whatever it is. But I saw that there was over 1,000 folks that breached the Capitol. So I was thinking that they need to have some type of incentive for these folks to turn themselves in voluntarily in the next 7 days. Say, for example, they're setting bonds that if you turn yourself in and we have to pick you up, we'll give you a lower bond and we'll take 3 months off your sentence. We got to get all these people, these hooligans, arrested and processed in the system right away. I didn't like the idea that we're going to have 25 or 30,000 military men and women with M4s in the nation capital. You know, that's what we're relegated to now to protect our government. I thought the better approach would be to sort of arresting the criminals right away, put them in custody so they can't go out and repeat this bad misconduct again. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know what the 20th is going to bring, Nate, but it doesn't seem as though these people morale has been dampened. It doesn't seem as though they are backing off of future plans. So I don't know how you plan on addressing them, Nate, other than with a show of force. Do you?
Well, you're right. Unfortunately, we have to continue the discussion next week because my producers just said that it's time to end the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for listening. Remember, you could follow us live on YouTube at Legal Issue of the Day with Nathaniel Lee, also on Facebook. Thank you for supporting our show, and also subscribe to YouTube channel. Thank you. And I also like to thank our special guests each week. And have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Great
Have a good
question
week.
great question to end on, Milton.
Thank you, Renee.
More to follow.